Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Linal Harris. We're just going to wait maybe 60 seconds or so to 120 seconds until I see the count here climbing, until it stabilizes a little bit. And I will be introducing you all to Keith Ferrazzi. So thanks for joining.
Linal, where are you right now?
Chicago.
Oh, great.
Yeah, in my in-home office.
I get it. Yeah, me too. I'm in LA. A little bit warmer here than it is there, I bet.
Yeah, but today is fairly nice. We're in the 70s, 72.
Oh, wow. I always get a kick out of it. People say, "Oh, today is fairly nice." We're in the 60s. Out here, we're wrapping up and putting on parkas in the 60s.
Oh man. Yeah, we're out in t-shirts like, oh, this is amazing.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I lived in Chicago for a few years in Old Town. I really loved it.
Really?
Yeah.
How long ago was that?
Probably before you were born.
Well, I look younger than than I actually am.
Good for you. Good for you. No, I was there in the early 90s.
Early 90s, okay. All right. So I was in high school in the early 90s.
Yeah.
And speaking of The Last Dance, watching this Last Dance with Michael Jordan brings back a lot of high school memories. Yeah. All right. So looks like we're ready to get started. So I want to welcome you guys to SMG Lunch Lessons. We're honored to have all of you tune in this afternoon. SMG Speakers Bureau connects event organizers to speakers. And SMG Lunch Lessons was birthed for a need to uplift and empower our community during these unprecedented, uncertain times. So I want to invite you all to join us every Tuesday at 12:30 p.m. for SMG Lunch Lessons, where we provide nationally recognized speakers and thought leaders from around the world to provide resources and tools to help you excel in all areas of your life. My name is Linal Harris. I'm a certified life coach and radio host. And I'm especially happy to introduce our featured speaker today, Keith Ferrazzi. I've had the opportunity to read his books. They've made a tremendous impact on me, a tremendous impact on my wife as well. And as a former chief diversity officer for a Fortune 500 company, these books have helped me expand my relationships. And I have to say that, Keith, in many ways, what I learned in your books were a key part of my success in corporate America. So from me to you right now, thank you personally for that.
Thank you.
And because of that work, today I'm a high performance coach. And so I'm pleased to welcome Keith Ferrazzi, New York Times bestseller of multiple books that I'm just going to let him talk about. One of my favorites, Never Eat Alone. Keith Ferrazzi, and I'll be back to take Q&A later. Let's get started.
Linal, thank you so much. What a beautiful introduction. And it's really touching me to have had the blessing over all of these years to actually make a real difference in people's lives. Now, I was recently just told I need to remove, it's already been done, like magic. Well, hello, everybody. I was given this time with you today, and I really consider it a great honor. It's not often that I just get a chance to have a bit of a fireside chat, walking you through the work of my life, frankly, and particularly positioning it for right now, at this very time, and how I believe this set of work that you can see behind me, stacked up just for you today, can really be of service. Let me do this. In about 1990s, I came to a realization that I wanted to start imparting some pretty significant information that allowed me, a poor kid from Pittsburgh. My dad was an unemployed steel worker in the crash of the steel industry in the 70s, that allowed me to excel in a way that serves society that I could have only dreamed of when I was a kid. And with that, I chose to move in a very different direction. I originally thought I would be in politics. I wanted to help families like mine that were suffering from the crippling economy of Pennsylvania at the time, And I was committed to do something that would help families not be in that same situation. And I thought politics was the route. But it was in the early 90s that I really chose business. And with that in mind, I never looked back. And I'm so happy that I did, because the ability today to be coaching organizations like General Motors, and my father was a UAW steelworker, and I find myself coaching the executive team of General Motors through this transformation, and early on throughout coming out of bankruptcy, and Delta Airlines and where they are today, and companies like Verizon. I am so blessed and so honored to be able to be in the corridors of the most powerful and prestigious organizations in the world, and also some of these disruptive organizations like Airbnb and Uber, and organizations that are coming up and blossoming and recreating the world. And it's all of the wisdom that I have achieved and obtained that I'd like to give you a bit of a rundown here over the next 40 minutes or so. So let me start by going backward a little bit. And I want to specifically focus on today, the critical relationships in your life. And what I learned in writing Never Eat Alone really started in those early days in Pittsburgh. So my dad was unemployed. My mom had to become a cleaning lady, and I went to work at a golf course. It was the local golf course, Latrobe Country Club. And I had never been exposed to rich people before. I mean, from my perspective, nobody in my family had even gone to college. And yet I knew that I wanted to be able to achieve things that didn't require me to work with my hands and see the beleaguered father that I had sitting at the dinner table in the evenings, bemoaning how challenging work was and how leaders and managers in his steel organization weren't listening to the front line. I wanted to do something. So I was curious when I was at the golf course. And my dad said something to me that was very powerful, and I want all of us to pay note of this. He said, "Keith, show up at the golf course a half an hour early." Show up at a golf course a half an hour early. I didn't understand what that meant, but I showed up. My dad was driving, and anytime my dad repeated himself more than once, I would just do it, because I joked. I'd called it immigrant Tourette's. He'd blurt stuff out I didn't understand, and nonetheless, I just had to acquiesce. So I show up at the golf course a half an hour early, and I'm walking around, and I noticed little things. I noticed where the golf pins were placed on the greens, and therefore I could help read putts better. I noticed how the greens were cut. And there was a woman who was a golfer. She was the best female golfer in the country club. Her name was Mrs. Poland. And Mrs. Poland, bar none, was absolutely the best golfer, and she played every single day. And one time she had me as her caddy. And I did my best, as I always would do. And the next day she had me as her caddy. Now, this doesn't normally happen. Normally it's the luck of the draw. Sometimes I would wait up there, and I would wait up there for an entire week, and I wouldn't even get out but once, just one time. And then the next day she had me as her caddy. Well, this was meaningful. I was bringing home $20 a day, which was the same amount of money my mother was making. And this money was meaningful. And all I wanted to do was keep my head down, keep doing a good job, and do my best. And all of a sudden, Mrs. Poland started asking me questions that I didn't know how to answer. She asked me questions like, "Keith, what do you want to do with your life? Where do you want to go?" I didn't want to answer. I wanted to just do my job. I was afraid. I was afraid of the position that I was in. I was afraid I would screw something up. And ultimately, Mrs. Poland wore me down. She said, "Keith, damn it, what do you want to do with your life?" I said, "Well, maybe someday I want to go to college, and maybe someday I want to be in politics." And she said, "Keith, that would be a great thing for you to do." 2 weeks later, she had the local congressman in her foursome who took me under his wing. This gentleman opened his library to me, suggested that I get involved in speech and debate. Ultimately, because of this gentleman's guidance, I ended up being #1 in speech and debate in the United States as a high school student. And then subsequently, that's what got me into Yale University. And my life was fundamentally changed as a result of that early intervention by both of those individuals. I ultimately didn't get into politics, if you're curious, because my mentor ended up getting indicted from Congress. So we'll just put that aside. Nonetheless, what made these individuals help so much? What made these individuals be so available to me and give me a leg up at a time when I was really in need? And there's a lot of good answers to that question. But let me give you a surprising answer. It's because I took 2 strokes off of Mrs. Poland's golf score. Listen, there were a lot of earnest, good kids. And yes, Mrs. Poland perhaps felt that she wanted to pay it forward. Maybe she grew up on the wrong side of the tracks as well. And she saw a charismatic, high potential kid, but there were a lot of them there. The reality is, it was because I showed up at the golf course a half of an hour early that it made all the difference. Because I was able to read putts better, diagnose what clubs to use, because I busted my butt because I needed the job so bad, and I worked harder than anybody else did. These are the reasons that this woman of authority, of power, of potential paid attention to me and changed my life. Now, why do I tell this story? Because today at a day when we're all so focused on the fears and the insecurities and the concerns that we all have, every opportunity that is available in front of you is available when you decide to be in service of others. Now, in Never Eat Alone, my first book, I defined something that I called a relationship action plan. And what I want all of you to do is I want you to walk away from today with a recognition that where you want to go next, how you want to get there, what you might want to do are all important questions. But one of the most important questions in your life will be the question who. Who are the individuals that I need to work with? Who are the individuals that I need to co-create with? Who are the individuals that will open up doors of opportunity for you? Who are those individuals? And instead of allowing those individuals to be serendipitous occurrences that just happen as you're navigating through the world, I want this to be a purposeful plan. I want you to recognize that the relationships that you have yet to build, the deepened relationships that are still out there to gain, are going to be your door opening to opportunity and success and abundance, particularly in this very scarcity challenged world that we're in today. So the first step you need to do, I have a process that I call FTD AOR. And I'll give you a little bit of that process now that'll be important. But then I want to move on to a few other critical areas. F is focus. What is it that you want to try to achieve? For me, I recognize it was pretty minimum focus as a kid. I wanted to go to college. I wanted to be in politics. I wanted to serve society and other families that were broken like ours were. And with that intention, I put that intention out. And then I asked the question, or really Mrs. Poland helped me ask the question, who? Who are the individuals that matched with that? And then once one gets to verbalize the focus and the mission, and at the same time, who are the individuals putting it out there who you might want to get to know, then you can begin a process of targeting those specific individuals for outreach, right? But in the process of doing that, you have to ask the question, what can you do for their success? How do you define what you can do for another person's success? And that, of course, is the real art form. And a lot of people think about when they meet somebody that they would like to get to know, they think of the transaction that they would like to have. So they go and they sell themselves. In reality, one needs to be curious. One needs to do their research in advance. One needs to understand what that person could use. I literally just got a call this morning from a woman that I met after giving a keynote speech a number of months ago. And she's been following me on social media. She has been reading my books. She has understood that one of the things that I'm doing right now is I have birthed a movement of executives. And the movement is called, let's not go back to work, let's go forward to work, going forward to work. And we're going to be benchmarking critical areas of business, leadership, hiring, onboarding, sales, and how these areas of leadership are being reinvented today as a result of the crisis, out of necessity. In 2 months, we have advanced the future of work in 2 months more than we did in 20 years. And I don't want to lose all of that insight and that wisdom. I've hired 2 journalists. I've begun to do the research. We're going to be posting all of this research, most likely either at ferrazzilearning.com or we'll be posting it at virtualteamswin.com. But the point is that this young lady had seen all of this, and she reached out to me this morning offering to be, on a volunteer basis, one of the journalists that would reach out and begin to do these interviews. Now, what was so powerful about that, and I was so struck by her generosity and her commitment to this movement, this nonprofit that I'm starting, that of all of the people that I could have spent time with today, I decided that I would spend time with her. And we've begun to conceive what it could be, what it could look like to have a bit of a partnership. Now, I suspect I will end up hiring this individual to be of service. I suspect I will end up partnering with this individual. All of it happened because she reached out and offered to be of service at a time when other people are so scarcity minded and fearful for themselves that they're asking for things, right? So that's so important to get focused on what you want to achieve. Identify the individuals that are important to you achieving them, defining the things that you can do to be successful for them, you can do to serve those, FTD. And then the other thing I'd like you to think about is aligning with people who have a shared mission with you, that you can partner together and work together. So for me, yesterday, I was on a phone call with a group of chief marketing officers. I was giving a speech to a group of chief marketing officers. And I had announced the Go Forward to Work principle that I wanted to advocate. And I announced the foundation. And I invited them to co-create this with me. Each of those chief marketing officers are big connectors. They all have deep networks. And I assumed that by getting them involved, it would be a tipping point into getting even more people involved. So by reaching out to that particular set of individuals, I was aligning myself with critical influencers. In my first book, Never Eat Alone, I talk about connecting with connectors. Connecting with connectors today is your portal to a whole different universe of people that you need to get to know. That young lady who reached out to me this morning, she connected with a connector. And now I am able to help her in her dreams and goals, and her interest in helping me build this movement of transformation of work is going to give me interest in understanding her dreams and goals so that I can serve her as well. That's the way the world works, but you've got to initiate that yourself. Focus, target, define, align, and then outreach. There's a lot of time available to you right now. And one of the things that I've begun to do, you're not traveling as much, your agendas are a little bit freer because of commute times, etc. And one of the things I've started to do is I've listed a name of 50 or so individuals that are so crucial to my future and success. And the willingness and desire to just go through the list, text them, stay in touch with them, offer support, ask how I can help. I mean, for me, first of all, I get a lot of joy out of this, out of being of service. I get a lot of warmth to connect with these individuals that I've known for years. And now is the time to double down and really be present in people's lives. And one of the things I learned early on and taught in Never Eat Alone is when you do connect with people, again, I've said lead with generosity, but then quickly follow with authenticity, even vulnerability. One of the more powerful things that I've been learning that right now, all over the world, people are getting more and more comfortable being vulnerable, more and more comfortable opening up and saying that they're struggling, opening up and talking about their fears and their confusion. And that's okay because it's a humanizing, it's an equalizing, it's an empathy creating element of all relationships when we can really bond. If you show up just transactionally, you're not going to deeply connect and loyalty won't be created. So when you show up with generosity, it gives you just a moment of time to talk about what's really going on in your life. One of the things I advocate when I'm coaching teams, and that's my predominant role today, coaching executive teams to be highly maximizing, highly adaptable organizations that find the value in the interdependencies, cutting across silos, leaders working with each other to do something that I'll talk to you about in a moment, to do something I call co-elevating, committed to a mission and going higher together. One of the things I do when I'm introducing these principles to executive teams and teams is I pause at the beginning of a meeting these calls that we have can be so transactional. But I pause at the beginning of the meeting and I have everybody go around just very briefly. What's going on in your life right now? Sweet and sour, less than a minute. And it's so easy for people. I mean, my mother is 89 years old. She's in Pittsburgh. She's got asthma. And I am so fearful that with her condition and predisposition of wanting to get out and not wanting to stay cooped up in the home, that she could be in harm's way. And that's a sour for me. And I'm deeply worried about that. And I know so many others, tuning in right now are as well for your own loved ones. And the sweet, I would say, is what I was saying earlier. I'm really loving the idea that I'm able proactively to identify those 50 names of important people in my life, important to my future, so that I can stay in touch with them more deeply, connect with them more deeply. Every night I'm having somebody in for dinner that just sits there at the dinner table on Zoom, right? And is a part of the dinner conversation that I'm having. It's extraordinary. You just prop up the iPad and there their faces on Zoom connecting around a dinner conversation. And it's quite intimate, actually, and I'm loving that. So sweet and sour is a way to begin to bond and deepen the loyalty and the real human connection underneath the generosity, which really strengthens that relationship so that opportunity can find itself to you, so that you can co-create extraordinary things. Focus, target, define, align, outreach, and then over time, just continuing to renew that process. Rethink your focus. And a lot of the focus today could literally just be, spending time with people that you love and care for. And then that's the focus. So who are the individuals? It's the people that you love and care for. Define what you can do for their success. So the process works no matter what your goals are, personal or professional. Let me segue a bit from Never Eat Alone and let me move to my second book, Who's Got Your Back? After Never Eat Alone was such a big success, I decided to do more research on the criticality of relationships in our life. And I remembered years ago that my mom had a group of ladies. This group of ladies was so important to my mother. She used to meet with them on a monthly basis. And every once in a while, the meeting would happen at our home. And all I remember is, my dad and I were kicked out of the house and we weren't allowed to stick around while those ladies were there. And so I asked my mom, I said, what did you ever do with that group of ladies? Why were they so important? What was that group to you? And she said, oh, you mean the card club girls? And often I'll have a picture of it and it's really warm. I can remember those women. They all, whether they were related or not, they all became Aunt Patty, Aunt Betty, Aunt Rita, etc. And those ladies, according to my mother, when my dad was unemployed, they cooked extra and brought it home to our house so that we wouldn't have to eat welfare cheese after the unemployment insurance ran out. And those ladies were there for each other. Some of them have passed away. And they sat on each other's beds and they said goodbye and they played cards with each other as they were, in the last days of their lives. When my dad died, those ladies were there and they were not only there for us at the immediate time, but when everybody else got on with their lives, they made sure my mother for months got out of the house until she was really ready to get out of the house on her own. I'm so blessed that my mother had that. But when I heard that story from my mom, I realized I didn't. And I realized the power and the importance of having those deep lifeline relationships. And it started a whole set of research and understanding, how do we have the three most important people in our lives? And how does that support us? How do those individuals assure that they will be mutually generous to us and us to them? How do we make sure that they're telling us the truth and when we don't want to hear it? How do we make sure that we hold each other accountable and lift each other up and give each other the energy? What we found is that there was a radical correlation between somebody who had those three lifeline relationships in their life and the abundance of success and happiness that we all deserve. So what was also important was the research we did showed that 50% of Americans said that they did not have a lifeline relationship, not even one. And of those who said they didn't have that kind of a relationship, as I wrote in my book, who's got your back, a relationship that really had their back, 60% were married. Now, I think all of us at this time have to ask ourselves, how are we showing up for those three people? Who do we want those three people to be that won't let us fail, right? That will lift us up and move us forward. Now, I highly recommend after this that you ask yourself the question, who might those be? And how are you investing in the same way that I talked about earlier with generosity? How are you investing with authenticity? How are you investing with your vulnerability with those individuals? And how are you co-creating solutions together that lift each other up? So it was on the basis of that I started to mold my thinking around how teams work in organizations and how cultures of organizations work. And I started to see and realize how much value was lost inside of companies because of the lack of these relationships, particularly across silos. There was one organization that I had gone into, it was a brand new CEO. His name was Bob Kerrigan. The organization was down in Bradstreet. And Bob believed that he needed to re-engineer the entire product and how it served the market. And traditionally, they had a data service, they had a product, they had technology, they had marketing, they had sales, and everybody earnestly did their job, but it wasn't meeting the growth needs, and it wasn't exceeding the expectations of the investors that they had. So Bob came in and he recognized that it was only going to be through the interdependencies of this business, the working together, the collaboration was the word that he was using. But when I came in as a coach of the team, what I helped them start to realize is that collaboration requires something more. It first requires a shared alignment to a mission, a vision. And there actually wasn't a shared alignment to that mission and vision. Bob had it and he spoke to it, but the various pieces had different interpretations of it that weren't coming together as a single mission that could achieve success. So the one thing we had to do is we had to wrestle and argue, but the problem was these individuals, they didn't trust each other authentically, wrestle and argue on these principles. Similarly, as I said, they weren't initiating the who's got your back lifeline principles that gave each other the kind of permission they needed to have breakthrough in each other's business lives, in this case, the redefinition of the product. So my coaching really focused on this, and I started to evolve a new word for collaboration because I didn't think collaboration was enough. So many people use collaboration only when they themselves can't get enough of the resources they need to do what they want to do. So they reach out to gain other people's resources so that their objective can be achieved. And the idea of that is people, oh, I'm sorry, hi again. Linal, are we coming to an end or are we good? Okay, great, all right. So the point is that we wanted to focus on this team coming together as an interdependent, critical team for each other's success. So I created a new word, not just collaboration, which was about, to me, it was about selling your ideas to people, or it was about gaining buy-in from each other. I wanted a group of individuals that were deeply committed to this mission, but also to each other, because we had to go higher together in the process. So I created a word, I called it not collaboration, but co-elevation. Going higher together, a commitment to a mission, but a commitment to each other. And that became the basis of my coaching and my consulting of the transformation of General Motors coming out of bankruptcy. That group of individuals needed to commit to radically co-elevate, not just internal to the organization, but with the dealership community, right? And it became the basis of all of our work with the World Bank, where the World Bank was working with partner clients that were country leaders to eradicate poverty, but they couldn't do it if the World Bank and its various divisions inside of the World Bank didn't co-elevate with each other and then bring co-elevation out into the marketplace, working with country leaders and NGOs and corporations, a much broader look at expanding the footprint of eradicating poverty in the world. So I've been so blessed, this evolution from this kid in Pittsburgh who had nothing, but it was through the relationships, those early relationships in my life that I began to have everything. And then the learning in my trajectory on how to develop and create great things in partnership with people, and never worrying about gaining more relationship, I'm gaining more resources or getting authority or control, but it's through co-creation. And it's through co-creation, just like I did with that group of marketers yesterday, like I'm going to do with that young lady that reached out to me. You know, you don't have to have authority and control. You just have to have a shared mission and the desire to together go higher and achieve that shared mission. So it's with that the new book began to get researched. This has been, I wanted to recreate the principles of leadership in organizations. And oddly enough, the man who wrote Never Eat Alone, the consummate book on networking, has been unrivaled in, almost 20 years or so. That man now wakes up, and I find myself looking at organizations and realizing that we don't do work in organization structures anymore. We don't do work within silos. We do work in networks. It's only through working in networks that we achieve extraordinary things today. And therefore, the same principles that applied in Never Eat Alone for a poor kid that didn't have opportunity looking to build a network, the very same principles apply to you in your organization looking to work across a network to create opportunity for yourself and them and create extraordinary things in the world. And that's the principles of the new book. And the new book is called Leading Without Authority. Leading Without Authority. Adam Grant, who's such a brilliant mind and young protege, actually. I knew him from when he first read Never Eat Alone, like Linal did, as he was talking earlier. It so influenced Adam that he decided to do his research on the subject of generosity. And I'm so blessed for that. I mean, to have triggered such a set of beautiful outcomes like Linal's coaching and his career, and Adam Grant and his research, and so many others. But the recognition that Adam said is, this is the actual definitive roadmap today for working and living in an organization of today's new work model. Now, what's so powerful and important to that is literally 20 years I've been preaching these principles of interdependency and lifting each other up. And only now in today's work environment will this be the model that will be able to come out of this. We could only come out of this, not in silos and not in isolation, but as we don't go back to work, but we go forward to work with a new set of principles and a new ideology of how we work together to elevate each other. This is the time. There's been more change in 2 months than there have been in 20 years, and we need to hold on to that change and co-create together the future. As I'm hoping so many, if any of you is listening, please just find me on my website, keithferrazzi.com. Find me on LinkedIn. That's probably just as easy. You can read the article I posted yesterday on LinkedIn about going forward to work, which is an invitation for any of you to co-create this in your organizations. And over time, you can follow this work. And I'm doing a much longer webinar just on this topic at ferrazzilearning.com. And all of this is free. I'm just trying to bring this to you so that we can recreate the future of work for all of us, So let me just pause for a second. And Linal, I think I've got another 10 minutes, I believe. I think I've got like 10, 15 minutes. Okay, great. I want to give you a little bit of advice for how you can marshal resources that you didn't realize were around you, that are sitting right here next to you, that you can marshal the kind of resources to be the leader of your organization today. And it really just starts with you having an inkling of a vision. So wherever you are in your world, whatever desire you have to be of service to the organization you are in, I want you to think of how you could go forward to work. What could you do differently? How could you recreate the events that you're doing? One of the things I've started to do, and you're welcome to reach out about this through SMG Speakers Bureau, we've begun to think about how events are going to change in the future. Because the reason people showed up physically to big events was the networking, right? But we have been now creating since 2012. In 2012, I saw the remote work was coming down the pike. I saw that there was going to be an increased desire to do more and more things remotely. I was coaching the executive team at Cisco when this happened. And they, at the time, were the leaders in remote work. They were the leaders. They ran WebEx and telepresence and that sort of thing. I solicited $2 million from them. And I did 3 years of research and published 20-some studies in Harvard Business Review and Fast Company on the subject of what are the new people rules in a virtual and remote world. And these are all available to you at virtualteamswin.com, virtualteamswin.com. I have all of these articles up there and webinars on this subject, etc. We are now the leading thinkers in this space. And part of this idea to continue this work on the future of work, going forward to work, not back, is to extend this insight, right, around all of this. Now, what I realized is that I do believe that virtual events can be incredibly powerful. And I believe that each of you watching this could be the leaders that usher in an entirely new future of how events occur, on how events occur. Now, as we recognize a lot of the things that we appreciated out of events, like the bonding, the networking, the serendipitous moments, we know we can't expect those to happen unless we engineer them, but we can engineer them. I've been working with organizations today to take what they used to have, which is these physical events, and what does it mean to transform them into virtual events where small pods of people can serendipitously meet each other in Zoom breakout rooms and go deeper with each other, just like they might have happened at a cocktail reception, right? But how can we go one step further by now asking people not just to maybe through a glass of wine at a reception and a story about someone's daughter that might then turn into another story about somebody else's son that might then turn into a bonding moment. All of that was just serendipity that happened at a networking break. How do we turn that into something intentional where people at a conference that is now virtual are broken into small rooms and they share that sweet and sour with each other in an intentional and purposeful way, led by a speaker like myself or somebody else who gives them that emotional permission to be vulnerable, right? And I have to tell you, there's so much vulnerability to be brought out and the value you'd be giving to your events. Right now, I see so many events happening, but they're happening without that emotional connection and tenor that they need. And we have to start, your community has to start to co-create a different way to do these events. I have to say that I recognize the importance of a physical event again, but would you like a physical event where everybody has to stay 6 feet apart from each other with a mask? Or do you want to do a virtual event in the right way where I can be right there with you telling the story of how I'm challenged right now with my foster son who is not able to get work. And frankly, I think quite pleased about that, to be honest with you. And I'm challenged with trying to figure out how much of a father with accountability I bring to the table because he's not really wanting to work and using it as an excuse. And I'm struggling with this and I would love to talk to somebody about it and get advice, right? I mean, this is the real stuff that's going on in our lives. And I want you, and I bring all of this up and it's a digression, but I bring all of this up for you particularly because I would love to work with you to create the event of the future because we've taken all of this research since 2012 in remote people rules. And I've been doing all of this coaching, since the early 2000s in terms of high impact teams and cultures working interdependently. We can crack the code and I've begun to think about how all of this applies to events. So please do reach out to me and let me know how I can be of service. You don't even have to book me as your speaker. I swear, I just want to be of service and I'm happy to work with you to give you ideas because today is the day that we can have a tipping point for a different and vulnerable and connected and powerful co-elevating world. And you control those events that make those things happen. So I'll get off my high horse for a second. I'll just come back to you with one other thing. And that is that whatever your vision is, and maybe that what I just laid out for you is a part of your vision, right? To be of service to your organization and recreate what an event is. But if it's not, that's okay too. Whatever your vision is, I want you to begin to be a movement leader. I want you to begin to be a movement leader. A movement leader is an individual who doesn't believe that they have to hire a bunch of people or pay a bunch of people. A movement leader is somebody who can enlist people, right? Who can reach out and bring them in through a shared mission that you don't give to them, but it's a shared mission that you give possibility to, and then you co-create. The power of you and Leading Without Authority, by the way, the book is is available today on Amazon. I would love you to buy it and let me know what your thoughts are and give me, engage me around this, because this is my movement. This is my movement. And what I want to see you do is I want you to identify what your movement is and who's your team. Who's the team that's going to create that movement with you? And I say movement's a big word, but I think in organizations, you being a leader of movement in the company, innovation, right? That's what I'm talking about, or anywhere in the world. And who's your team? Who are the individuals you're going to enlist? That's the first chapter, and that's the first question. How do you identify those individuals? Then how do you reach out to them? The same lessons you learned in Never Eat Alone. You reach out with generosity. In this book, I talk about serve, share, and care. Serve, share, and care. Serve, reach out with generosity. Share, open yourself vulnerably. Be available to people. And I teach you how to do that in ways that even introverts can appreciate. And care, which is, it's not just about you, it's about them. It's about them. And that's the co-creation that we want to have together. Serve, share, and care. And then I teach you in Leading Without Authority how you can begin to co-create. How do you collaborate in a new age way that isn't just you pitching ideas at people hoping that they buy them, right? How do you create something great? Diversity and inclusion, and Linal was talking about this earlier. Diversity and inclusion, I think we've done a reasonable job, although we still have a long way to go in making sure that we have diverse populations in our organization and at particularly different levels and different roles. But where we have done a terrible job is inclusion. We get diverse people in the seats and we don't unleash truth. We don't unleash co-creation. We don't let people be themselves. We don't let people bring their diverse and authentic self into the ideation and the innovation. Right now, this innovation requires diversity. It requires diverse opinions, wrestling ideas together. It requires candor, and it requires courage, and it requires challenge. Our research has shown that 74% of people in teams do not believe it's safe for them to speak their minds in meetings. 74% of people do not believe they're capable of speaking their minds in meetings. That's abhorrent, and you know it. You know what your organizations are like. This is a part of my movement. A co-elevating team thinks about feedback and challenge as a blessing. They think about feedback and challenge as a gift, because underneath that feedback and challenge is care. It's I give a damn, and therefore I won't let you fail. I won't let us fail. So your ability, and I apologize, I know this is a lot. I've taken you through a lifetime, 53 years of thinking and work in a very short period of time. But where I want to land with you is that you can be that leader. All you need is the audacity to have an idea. You don't even have to have that idea baked. In fact, it's better that it's not. You have to have the audacity to have a vision of what's possible. And then the heart and the openness to invite people in to co-create with you to achieve great things. And then the willingness and the care to serve that community until they're able to serve each other. Because that's the final chapter, which is we create this community, which you might have called a team in the past, and this movement of individuals that now are co-elevating each other. And the burden is off of your shoulders. And you're a peer of a group of individuals going higher together. And that's the culture that I'm advocating for in the future. That's the culture that I begin to see a glimmer of. My LinkedIn article that I just posted this morning or yesterday is a call for the behaviors that we're seeing right now. I have never, in my 20 years of coaching executive teams, I have never heard more executive teams say to each other, how can I help you? I have never in my life, in the last 2 months, heard more of vulnerability and authenticity in an executive team corridors. I have never heard more. And by the way, we are sprinting on a weekly basis and adjusting. That's called agile. Organizations have to be radically adaptable in the future. We've got to be able to capture growth that we never saw, and we have to be able to avoid risks that we never saw. You know, it's sad to me that this crisis occurred and large organizations with large practices and divisions in China were surprised in the United States a week before everything hit the fan. That is not the kind of adaptability we need to build into the future. Why? Because the inclusive voices of our Chinese brethren weren't involved in the dialogue that we were having in these global companies. It's a perfect example of what we need to fix. And yet today we're sprinting every week and then looking around and adapting to the market. What does the market need? What do our customers need? What's going on in our organization? And then we sprint for another week and we look around. That's the organization of the future. That's radical adaptability. Combined with co-elevation will bulletproof your organization and make it successful. And it will bulletproof you and make you successful. All of this is in the book. I really do consider this my culminating work. It took 8 years of research to get here. And there are 23 CEOs of companies that you know and admire and respect that have read this book and have validated that this is the new operating model for how we're coming out of this mess today. This co-elevating operating model, this model of radical adaptability is right here. But I wrote this book not just at the organizational level. It's like the new good to great. I wrote this not only as at the organization level, but I wrote it for you. I want you to be that leader in your own organization, in your own pocket of the world, in your own family. I want you to invite people in. I want you to co-elevate. I want you to have the lifeline relationships that my mother had. And I want you to have the opportunities that I had when I was a young man, awakening to how important relationships were and are today to my life. And finally, let me just give you again some ways you can enlist me and be of service to you. Please join the movement of going forward to work. Let's go forward to work, not back to work, right? You can do that by just connecting with me on LinkedIn. It's probably the easiest way to do it. Just connect with me on LinkedIn. If you want to learn a lot more about all of our research around virtual teams and virtual teaming and virtual work, we've got literally almost 10 years of research in there, way before anybody else has been thinking about this. We have, and that's all at virtualteamswin.com. Oh, I don't know. What else can I do for you? I'm hopeful that this was helpful. I hope that my passion at least came through and that you were touched by my desire to help you be more successful. Linal, what do you think about some Q&A?
I'm all for it. Let's see. Yep. So I'm unmuted. All for it. So if you have questions, I have a few questions here already, but if you have questions, I saw a few come through. Please go ahead and drop your questions into the Q&A portion of the webinar here. And Keith, first, I just want to thank you. Thank you for providing such a compelling talk, for teaching us and also reminding us of the power of relationships, especially at a time when we're having conversations about social distancing.
Yeah.
How do we socially connect in this new environment? And you definitely laid out the recipe for that. So thank you for that.
And by the way, I'm concerned that if we rush back to physical interaction too quickly, I'm not even, Peter Diamandis is a good friend of mine. I've been talking to him about his concerns around some of the medical issues of rushing back too fast.
Yeah.
But I'm concerned that we're going to go back and we're going to be more sterile. We're going to go back into a physical world. And as I said, we're going to be 6 feet apart and masks on, right? I would rather stay here a little longer. Yeah. And I would rather get this right. So that the intimacy, the vulnerability, the generosity, the co-creation, the co-elevation, we could get it right here. And I know how to get it right. We've been designing this formula, coaching large organizations. I want you to learn these principles here so that when we do go back and we're able to be, and we've got the vaccine, we're able to be interconnected with each other in a way that we wouldn't otherwise, that we can really benefit from that intimacy. Right? Does that make sense to you?
It makes perfect sense. It actually is a good segue into one of the questions that we have, which is, how do we create lifeline relationships? You said many of us don't have them, right? 50% don't have them. 60% plus married couples don't feel like they have a lifeline relationship. How do we create lifeline relationships in a social media, social distancing world?
Well, the one thing I have to say is, the great thing about the social media is it is the broadest aperture of your relationships, right? And it is quite wonderful because now you can build relationships and connections with people all over the world. You can stay in contact with people, in perpetuity that are geographically dispersed you wouldn't normally see. And that's the benefit. right? The downside is that medium doesn't necessarily lend itself for intimacy and vulnerability and that serendipitous moment, right? Mm-hmm. So you need to make that purposeful. Now, you don't need, 20,000 followers to have 3 lifeline relationships, right? You've got them already. And you've got people in your life. I always think of relationships on a spectrum, and I measure it. I'm more analytical this way. -1 is a relationship that you're strained in your life. A 0 is somebody you want to get to know, you don't know. And a 5 is somebody that you could call on the weekend and cry and say, I don't know what's going on, right? So think about that spectrum from -1 to 5. You've got 2s and 3s in your life today who would be very open to being a 4 or 5.
Yeah.
And that just requires investment. And the investment is exactly what I just said to you. It's generosity and vulnerability. It's curiosity, serve, share, and care. You get that 2 or 3 on the phone and say, you know what? I've always respected you. I've always cared for you. I would love to get to know you better. Let's do a sweet and sour. Let's talk about legacy and dreams. Let's talk about fears and concerns. And I'm going to listen with the perspective of how can I help? Who's not going to accept that call and want to have that Zoom call and put the video on?
Yeah.
You do this, eye to eye.
Beautiful, beautiful. All right, we have another question here. Right before the question, though, I just want to invite you guys, if you enjoyed this with Keith Ferrazzi, go out, make sure you follow him. Follow him on LinkedIn, like he said. Follow him on Instagram. I believe it's Keith Ferrazzi on Instagram. Follow him on his Facebook page. Yeah.
My team checks the LinkedIn. Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. So make sure you go out and follow him so you can continue in this conversation even after we're done. Here's another really good question. You mentioned introverts. What do you suggest for us introverts to do to connect more easily?
Start with your lifelines and then move out. I was on the phone yesterday with an attorney general of one of our states, and his chief of staff Zoom bombed us. And he, was talking to the attorney general, chief of staff came in. He goes, hey, I just saw this on my AG's calendar. I have been such a big fan of yours. I'm a total introvert. I read Never Read Alone. And it just gave me some of those simple things to do that got me out of my shell. And the answer is start small. Don't overwhelm yourself. Find people you already care for who are 2 or 3 and have an intimate conversation. You don't have to scale, right? You don't have to have 1,000 relationships. You don't have to be big, swashbuckling, charismatic. You just have to be earnest. You have to care. But if you're an introvert and you only have so much energy, make sure you pick the right relationships that you're going to co-create great things with, the right relationships that might be lifelines, the right relationships that are important to you, like your boss, etc. Invest in the most important relationships.
Got it. Here's another really good question, and it comes from Pam C. She's asking, she's like, I'm looking to partner with someone with interest in investing in real estate. I've done it in the past, but folks have bailed on me. How do you find serious partners who are not in your immediate friend, or we might call lifeline relationship realm?
Yeah. Well, look, one of the things I always look at are what are the core values of an individual and how have you seen that show up in the past? So the individuals that you're first of all, you got a bad picker. You're picking people that are bailing on you. Chances are they have a history of bailing. You probably haven't done, quote, the reference checks. You haven't talked to mutual friends and asked them, are these individuals resilient? Do they stick with things? How you ask them to tell stories about. So you really do need to be a little bit more discerning on who you bring on board. But in terms of that, the next question is you start putting it out there. Just say what you said. I want to invest in real estate and I'm looking for people who are trustworthy, loyal, and individuals who stick with stuff. Tell everybody that. Put it on your social media, right? And say, who do you know that wants to go on a journey with me, right? To really crack the code of real estate investment right now. Put it out there. When you put it out there in the very clear way, and then you always say, I'm looking for somebody who doesn't flake. Just put it out there. You'll start to have your friends help source these individuals for you. You got to put out there what you want.
Awesome. Here's two quick questions that came from the same person. They're curious about the articles in the Harvard Business Review and how they can find those. And also curious about the latest LinkedIn article. Wanted to know the name of that article.
Yeah, it's literally the top of my box. So if you go Keith Ferrazzi at LinkedIn, it's the very top of my box there. I will find you the title is, I'm looking at it here, Let's Never Go Back to Work. Let's Go Forward. And it's Keith Ferrazzi. So if you go to Keith Ferrazzi on LinkedIn, it's the last thing I posted just now. And then all the HBR pieces, webinars on this topic, etc. Virtual Teams Win, virtualteamswin.com, virtualteamswin.com. And one other thing, I mentioned this earlier, and this is a favor to me. If you think you're going to buy Leading Without Authority someday, please buy it now. The pre-release of the book is now, and May 26th it actually ships. The reason I ask you to do this is the book industry is in peril right now, just so you know. And it's not clear whether or not important books, and I do believe this is 8 years of research. And look, it's going to be fine, but the way the book industry works is if a book isn't selling significantly at the very beginning, then that book goes out of order. And then I have to lobby and work hard to get it back when all of this ends. So it would be a great gift to me if you appreciate what I've done today, is if you just right now go on, buy Leading Without Authority at Amazon. Wherever you buy your books would be great, it's fine. But it would really be important because you're going to get it anyway, and I think you're going to need to, because I do believe this is going to be the operating system that a lot of people will be talking about in the future.
Keith, let me tell you this, man. I when you were talking about the book, the research that you put in the book, I was like, okay, I know it took 8 years of research, but I needed it 8 years ago, and I need it now. Too. Yeah. I'll definitely be going out grabbing the book, because that's the one I don't have, and I would encourage everyone that follows me, that follows SMG, that is on this webinar right now, just even as a thank you to the value that you provided us today. I encourage.
And thank you, SMG. Isn't this beautiful that they're doing this?
Absolutely. What
a great series, and what a lovely thing for me. I mean, I've had such a great opportunity to I haven't had this. I mean, all my talks are very custom, and I do exactly what the client's looking for. What a nice opportunity just to riff for me. I really love this.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Keith, I see that we're at time. Want to be respectful of your time. For me, as someone who's read your work, someone who's benefited from your work on a very personal level, I just want to say thank you once again. I also want to thank you on behalf of SMG speakers for being willing to come out and share your wisdom, the deep breadth of knowledge you have about relationship with all of us today. And for those who didn't make it in the replay, who will have the opportunity to watch this, just really grateful and thankful that you were willing to do this.
Truly my pleasure.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
All right.